Joining us now, Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii. She's a member of both the House Armed Services and the Foreign Affairs Committee. She's also an Iraq War veteran. When you hear ISIS threatening, the next attack would be right here in Washington, D.C. Is that a credible threat, or are they just sort of boasting?
I think after we look at what just happened in Paris, we've got to be very proactive to make sure that no city in the United States is the next target for an ISIS or Al-Qaeda style attack. You know, I think as we watch this manhunt going on across Europe, I'm reminded of a vulnerability and a weakness that must be addressed. We've got a visa waiver program that really does not address the vulnerability of the open and porous borders between Syria and Turkey, and we've seen already how many foreign fighters from across Europe are able to travel through those borders and are not being tracked and are not being they're not able to be addressed before going through that. So we need to temporarily suspend this visa waiver program until the intelligence community gets a handle on this and exactly how large it is and what's going on.
So what you're suggesting is that French citizens or Belgian citizens, right now, they don't need to get a special visa. They want to come to the United States as tourists. For example, there's a visa waiver program. As you say they should be required to get visas?
They should be required to go through the normal visa application process so that we can thoroughly vet exactly who's trying to come into the United States, because as it is now, really it could be just a matter of hours before someone travels through these different borders, someone who's become a foreign fighter, who's been fighting in Syria, and ends up here on United States soil presenting a potential threat.
Because these terrorists in Paris, these suicide bombers, they were either French citizens or Belgian citizens, European citizens. So what you're concerned about is that they could just get on a plane and fly to the United States.
That's exactly my concern. And with the open and porous border between Syria and Turkey and the lack of tracking from people who are coming through those borders and going from Turkey into other European countries, especially with the thousands and thousands of foreign fighters that we're seeing from all across Europe, this is something that we've got to address immediately.
Because if the United States imposes these kinds of visa restrictions on French or other European citizens, those countries are going to do the same thing to U.S. citizens who want to travel there. And that's going to cause a disruption in movement, in trade, business, stuff like that. You've heard those arguments.
I've heard those concerns, but our first and foremost concern needs to be keeping the American people safe. You want to talk about the effect on the economy if these actions are not taken and an attack is allowed to occur here, even though we've identified this vulnerability. That is not something that anyone wants to deal with. So we've got to recognize the potential threat, the weaknesses that exist there, and shore up those weaknesses so that we don't allow something like that to occur.
The CIA Director, John Brennan, in a very important speech today, Q&A, that there are more ISIS attacks, in his words, in the pipeline right now, and they might be attempting to come here to the United States. That's your concern. But he also said something very alarming. He said U.S. intelligence right now is strained. That's a pretty alarming statement.
It is alarming, and there are limitations to what the intelligence community can do. This is why it's so important for those in the intelligence community to be using the resources that they have to focus on those credible threats, focus on those who have these potential links, who have been identified as potential threats to the United States, rather than going through these bulk gathering of data on every single American, gathering information on all of our phone calls. That's a waste of resources, and it really puts way too much information out there when they should be really culling that information in a very narrow fashion that's targeted on those who present a potential threat.
The ringleader in this particular case, Abdul Hamid Abaoud, is believed to have been involved in the foiled Brussels attack last winter. But he managed to elude intelligence law enforcement in Europe and Belgium and elsewhere. He may be in Syria, for all we know right now. So was there a major intelligence blunder in Europe?
Well, I think this is exactly what we've got to look at as we learn more information about this, and why I remain concerned about the open avenues of travel that people have between Europe and the United States as we deal with this very specific situation and the lack of accountability really on the intelligence communities on both sides on exactly who these foreign fighters are, where they are, and what they're doing.